Right, welcome back. I do hope all of you are okay so far. We will move to the second half of the session, but then I'll urge you to finish the task later, or maybe when we're done, finish it up. And if you have any difficulties, you can let me know. And something else, also on projects, you do have milestones, right? Milestones are not really duration. Maybe you just want to, yeah. So maybe if I had to indicate a milestone like project completion. Let's say I have an activity project completion. With a milestone, all I have to do is enter 0. Right. If I have 0, that shows what? It's a milestone. Right. And once you enter 0, you have a milestone, which is not a duration. So maybe if you have project completion, some sort of handover event, or just something, yeah, you indicate it with a milestone, and that's it. I think, yeah, check out YouTube as well. You have a lot of video resources on using the Asta Power project, and I believe with the basic knowledge you have, you should be able to set up your coursework one as well. So the second half of the session will focus on what cash flow, right? Establishing what your cash flow forecast. What's cash flow, by the way? When we talk of cash flow, what does it mean? Or what did you discuss with George last week? Because I think George did teach you about cash flow, what cash flow are, and why they are named. What are cash flows?
In and out of the money.
In and out of the money. Right. Yeah, so cash flow basically has to do with money coming in and out of what? An organization. Right. And you want to be able to predict your cash flow because you want to know when to make what payments to your subcontractors. You want to know when to make payment to what your supplier. You want to know when the client will pay you. Right. I mean, without the cash flow, they say is the very life of the building trade. Right, because what happens is that as a contractor or a subcontractor, you only have a limited amount of money in your own account. So if, for instance, you get a project of, let's say, £100 million or £200 million, you do not necessarily have the whole chunk of that money in your bank account as a contractor. You probably may have, 20 million or 50 million pounds sitting in your account, right? So what you want to do is to be able to structure your project and payment terms so that by the time you are done using that 15 million pounds, the client is able to pay you for that so that you are able to have money to continue your project. Because if you say you're going to borrow the whole 100 million from a bank to be able to finance the project may end and you may use your profits to pay up the interest components of whatever loan you are taking, right? So typically in the construction industry, what happens is that contractors need to wait for 2 or 3 months before they are paid. So, as a contractor, you work, let's say, in January, or maybe you work in October, but the client does not pay you. So maybe if you probably do concreting for this room, the client will not pay you within this month. You need to have a QoS. If you're going by the traditional BOQ, you need to have a QoS who will come and measure and then prepare a certificate to the client that you've actually done that amount of work. And typically it takes about a month for that certification to be done. So at every point in time, it's more like your money, you have a 1 month delay before you are paid for whatever money you spend. You get it? It's more, yeah, so because of that, you need to be able to negotiate or plan your finances well. So you know when to borrow money from the bank to finance your operations. Right. There are various cash flow forecasts. So with a contractor, the good thing about a contractor is that the contractor is usually paid on monthly basis. So the contractor maybe spends £10,000 or £100,000 for the client on the work, and the client to pay him him or her a month's time. Or probably if it also depends on the sort of contract they are using. There are some contracts where maybe if you go by the NEC option A, right, which is the activity the price contracted activity with activities. In that case, the client will only pay you when you complete an activity, right? Because your pricing document is what an activity, it's on activity basis. So maybe if excavation or foundation is one activity, as and when you finish the activity, then the client will come pay you. If it, let's say your block work is another activity, when you finish the activity, then the client will come pay you. So depending on the contract form and what's been stated in the contract, that determines how you are paid. Some also go by milestone basis, where it's like, okay, if you reach, as a contractor, if you're able to finish the first floor, we'll pay you for all works done up to that stage. If you finish maybe the second floor, we pay you for works done up to the second floor. So you as a contractor need to be able to negotiate favorable payment terms for yourself, because without that you may have to work for 4 months or 5 months before you are paid, and you don't want to do that, right? The clients, if you're a developer, right, it's a very different scenario. So unlike a contractor that's paid monthly, as a developer, you only get money in when you start selling your properties or buildings, right? So for a developer, you could probably start, if you start a project, maybe start in January and maybe complete, let's say, December. From January to December, it's all about what? Spending, right? So if this were to be, let's say, a graph, and let's say this was spending and this was some sort of income, right? So from January to maybe December, it's all about spending. All you are doing is you what? Pay your contractors, pay your suppliers. And maybe once you're done with the project, then you start what? Earning some form of what? Income. That's when you start earning income. So typically, because you are always spending, which means what? You need to borrow money. You need to what? Pay interest. Borrowing means it comes with what? Interest. You need to be able to, as a developer, you need to be able to negotiate for long-term funding, so that you're able to tell the bank that I'll probably pay you in the next 5 years because I'm doing this project, which is quite key in that regard. So when you look at, let's say, a cash flow, let me just show you one document of a project. When you typically look for
Can you provide those Excels on?
No, I can. That's quite private. Where I used to work before,
Okay.
so I'm unable to provide this. So for instance, this was a residential development, right? This was a residential development for 50 units, and you do realize that these are the expense column, and these are so cash flow, you need to consider your expense and income. So this was the income, which shows what was being sold. It showed, the properties that were being sold, and this were what had to be paid in terms of expenses. So right from the beginning of the project, all the clients, there was no income. All that was happening was what? Expenditure. So what you realize is that your net cash flow is always in the negative, right? Because you are always paying.
Is it inflow or
outflow? At the very beginning, it's an outflow because you are not earning any revenue. You've not sold any development. So it's all outflows, which is negative. So inflows only become positive right when the project it's completed and the client starts earning with some form of income. Right, this is where the major, at this stage, some form of sales were being undertaken, but you had spent so much. So income started hitting in here, and that's when it started, your net cash flow started turning into some sort of positive. Right. It's similar to, so it operates similarly to various developments. If you have like a hostel project, hostel you probably need to rent, so it may take you about 10 years to be able to make up your money, right? Because every year you need, unlike maybe if you're doing a residential development where you can sell and have some bulk income, for a hostel it may take you over 10 years. The same for, let's say, if you're doing a mall development, you are renting to people, so it may take you a much longer time to rent to people. So it takes quite a much longer time for developers or client organizations to be able to make their money. The thing about cash flow, for contractor financing or cash flow, it follows an S-curve, right? The S-curve basically tells you that, what the S-curve does is that if you are starting your project, right, and you're not too sure how your cash flow will be, especially at the preliminary stages, right, and you don't have your program in place, right, the cash flow tells you that for the first 1/3, if your project is, let's say, over 12 months, for the first third, the first quarter or 1/3 duration of the project, you spend 25% of the contract value. And then for the next 1/3, right, you spend 50% of the contract value. And then the final 1/3, you spend 25% of the contract value. So basically, it's telling you that when you start your project, if you divide your project into 3 equal parts, let's assume the project was 9 months. So 3 equal parts. All it's telling us that for the very first 3 months, you're likely to spend 25% of the contract sum, because that's when you are starting your project. You have, the activities you are doing, there may not be so many. But in the middle third, where a lot of activities start happening, you have so many subcontractors coming to site, you spend 50% of your contract sum there. And then when you come into project completion, which is the last third, you spend an additional 25% of your contract sum. So when you are plotting your cash flow cumulative curve, which is an S curve, it sort of gives you an idea as to whether what the plan you have is realistic or not. Right. So that's the rule of thumb for the S curve. The first 25% is within that's the rule of thumb. If we have to draw, we said what a cash flow is the money in and out of an organization, right? So to be able to plot or draw our cash flow, right, we need to know what a client has, as a contractor, we're coming in from the contractor perspective. We need to know what a client has to pay us and when the client has to pay us, right? Which is the cumulative, the value, because what you are charging the client is the cost of doing the work plus what's your profit margin. So the money the client will pay is the value. You also need to know the measurement and certification interval. What does the contract say? Does the contract say you'll be paid every month, as in 1 month after interim valuation, or 2 months after your interim valuation? That will help you assess when the money will come in. And then also, you need to know what the retention conditions are. I believe you all know what retentions are. You all do know what retentions are, right?
Yeah.
Right, so you need to know what the retention conditions are. Typically, retentions range between 3 to 10%. It depends. And then it's normally, they normally retain that amount of money to be able to take care of any defects which happens during the defect liability period. And normally retention, at practical completion, they release half of the retention, right? And the other half after your defect liability period. And then also, as a contractor, you also need to know when you think you want to pay your subcontractors, right? I mean, if a subcontractor does work, or maybe you have supplied from maybe a supplier, would you want to pay them once they deliver those materials? Or would you want to negotiate with them that, okay, for every material you deliver to me, I'll pay you a month or two after? You know, you as a contractor need to be able to negotiate those payment terms, bearing in mind when you receive money from your client, right? So because those subcontractors are doing work on the project, so if the client will have to pay you maybe 2 months later, why would you want to pay your subcontractors right when they do the work? If you want to do that, then you lock up your capital.
But sometimes you might get a good discount.
Sorry?
You might be getting a good discount.
Yeah, but you have the money, because as a main contractor, you probably may have about 5 or 6 projects, right? And you need to be able to use the company's resources to manage all those projects. So you want to see how you can manage your capital. That's why. So once you know all this, it's quite easy to plot your cash flow. So the first thing we want to do is to look at the value versus time, right? Basically, we want to know when the client will pay us and the sort of graph we'll get from it, right? So let's take this example. Let's take this example. We have so in this case, we have this project is for an office block, right? And let's assume we've been able to draw our program, right? So the program also shows the value of activities which have been extracted from the bill of quantities. So based on the bill of quantity, we know our setting up cost to be 25,000, the cost of doing the work as a contractor. We know the excavation to be 45,000, so these are the cost to us. But then also we want to put an overhead margin of 11% on the cost of the work. Right? It costs you 25,000 to do the work, but then you want to, because of you want to add your profit and overhead margins, you want to make it 11%. So to be able to, the money you charge to the client will be your cost plus your margins. Right? Because basically your value, the value of doing value is cost plus the percentage of profits and overheads. But in this case, we know our margins to be 11% of cost. So the value of what we expect to receive from the client will be 1.12 of the cost. Sorry, 1.1 of the cost. So if we were to plot if we have to plot the cumulative value curve, we want to know how much the client will pay us and when that money will come in, right? So the exercise is using the Excel template provided, produce a forecast cash flow table, calculate the cumulative value, produce an S-curve. If you go onto your Moodle page, there is an Excel template there called Week 6 Seminar 1, Cumulative Value Template. If you can download that Excel sheet. So it's on the Moodle page. Go onto your Moodle file. If you go onto the Moodle page, you go to Learning Package 4, right? And the learning package 4, you go to the folder labeled week 6 session on Asta Power projects and cash flow forecast. And then you download the Excel template. So let's try to complete the table, or let's try to fill in there. So what we have here, you know, the program, it tells us when the month in which an activity will take place. So typically you assume that the money will be spread equally over the month, over the number of months, right? So if we take setting up the site, it's what, 25,000, right? So what we do here is we enter 25,000. Based on, we enter with 25,000. 25,000. The next activity is what? Excavations, right? But excavation occurs over what? February and March, over 2 months. So we assume it was evenly spread over over 2 months, which means 45,000 divided by 2, right? So for each month, we'll spend 22,500 on what? Excavation. The next activity is what? Concreting foundations, but that's also what? Over 2 months, right? Which means the total sum 85,000 divided by what? 2. Yeah. Sorry, I hope you are following, please.
Yes.
You are not? Sorry. Sorry, is it okay for everyone, please?
Is it the download from the gun?
It's okay. Okay. So the next activity is what? Fill up excavation, which is what? 5,000. But that's just what? 1 month. So we just enter 5,000. And hardcore filling is also what? 12,000. Just 1 month. Concrete flooring, 110,000. 1 month. And then concrete in column, it's what? 2 months. Right? It goes over 2 months. So that means we need to spread it over 2 months. And then block work is what? 2 months. Similarly, we divide by 2. And then electrical and plumbing also occurs over 2 months. Roofing, same 2 months. Floor, wall and ceiling finishes over 2 months, so we spread it over 2 months. External works, it's what? 3. External works occurs over what? 3 months. So which means we need to divide it by what? 3. So this. And then testing and commissioning also occurs over 3 months. So we divide by 3. And then final clean and handover 1 month. But when you take the last item is what? Preliminaries. Right. Preliminaries is what's time related, and it normally occurs over the total project life cycle because it occurs over the total project life cycle. And the total duration is what? 13 months. So we divide the sum for preliminaries by what? 13. The first thing I would do when I'm done is to check whether what I have here, my total. So I sum everything here. So this serves as a check to determine whether what I put in here is the same on what the left-hand side. So I check the various items. The sum here is 709. 709. So I know I'm correct because whatever I have here, right, sums up to what 709. And then when I come to the budget cost actual, it's also what 709. So it's a cell 7 check mechanism. But then what I've done here is I've already input the formulas in the Excel file. So the total, or if you're building it up, you need to estimate the total you get for every month. So at every point, for every month, you sum all the activities, the sum of the various activities, you need to sum them up. So for month 1 in January, I'll spend 30,000, the cost of the work is 30,000. If I come to March, the cost of the work is 70,000. These are the sums for the various months. But this is just for the actual cost of doing the work. To be able to, how much am I getting from the client? That's what my value. It needs to include my profit and overhead. And in this case, our profit and overhead was 11%, right? So what we'll do is we need to multiply.
Into 1.11.
Sorry?
Into 1.11.
Yeah, 11% times the cost of work, which is 30,000, will give us what our profit and overhead. Yeah, I could have deleted the cell and calculated directly, but because this is the first example, that's why I left it. Typically, I'll just go to the monthly value. If I were to be doing this, I'll just ignore this. I probably would just have gone straight to the monthly value. But because this is the first time, so you calculate your profits, which comes up to what the 11% times the cost of doing the works, and you're able to get a value, right? So how much would you be paid for every month? How much are you expecting from the client? That would be what the cost of doing the works plus your profit and overhead margin, so which is the summation of this plus the rule 22 and rule 24. But then you want to know your cumulative value over time as a project is ongoing. Because you want to plot the S-curve. So for the cumulative value, all you have to do is, in the very first month, there's no cumulative value because it's all unpaid. But in month 2, my cumulative value will be what I've been paid in month 1, plus what I expect to be paid in month 2. So this plus that. Similarly, when I go to month 3, it will be what I was paid at the end of month 2 plus what I'll be paid in month 3 to be able to get my cumulative value. So basically, you're estimating what you expect to get from the client over the project duration. And once you get that, you plot your S-curve, right? Which shows you what you earn over the project life cycle. Right. So any questions about that? Getting the cumulative value curve. What do you expect the client to pay you?
How would the client work out this value? What is the difference between what obviously the contractor and the client? The client also has to predict his expenses. Regarding what we're doing in our coursework, how would that resemble this? Would it be exactly the same?
No.
How would that, you know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, the client will be a bit different, right? So for now, what we're looking at now, we'll get on to later the cost. So even on the contractor side now, what we've looked at now is what the contractor expects to receive from the client, which is the value. We are yet to look at the outgoings, which is the cost for the contractor. So on the client side, normally the client, based on the program, the client will also need a program, right? So based on the program, so the value we've calculated now will be the outgoings for the client.
Yeah.
To be cost to the client.
So the costs, yeah.
Exactly. So
this is income for the contractor.
Yeah.
And outgoings for the. But what is the difference? What will be the difference at the very early stages of a preliminary design for a project? Because surely you will not know exactly what the contractor's profit and I'm sure there's standards.
No. So I mean, when you plan it, at the time the client is doing an initial plan or some sort of feasibility estimate, right? Those things are usually, let's say, preliminary estimates, right? And the client basically, so if you look at this, let me just show you something. Right. So this I would upload onto the models page. This is for a client, right? At the very beginning, the client has for land acquisition, design and building, and then let's assume the client intended to do an office construction, residential and retail development, right? So typically the client wouldn't know, because they may be at a very early stage, because the bills of quantity and the detailed design are yet to be prepared. At this stage, the client needs to do preliminary approximation or some sort of approximation in terms of using the S-curve. The fact that within the first tag, the client will spend 33%, and based on the sort of project duration the client wants, maybe if it's let's say over 12 months, then the client tries to do some sort of rough calculation in terms of, okay, I think in month 1 I may spend 4% of the total sum.
But it must be based on something, right? I mean, it can't be random. It must be based on something, these percentages.
So that's what it's based on the S-curve, where we show that in the first third, right, the client, normally the cost of your expenditure is for 25% in the first third. And it's been proven over time, like there's been research that's been done over time to show that in the first third, normally your expenditure is 25%, and then the middle third, it's 50%.
Understood.
Right. So based on that, just try to allocate percentage, because at this stage, it's all about planning. You are forecasting. They are not absolute. It's only for the client. It's only when maybe the actual bills of quantity or the contract document are signed that the client may update this document into absolute figures. But at this stage, they are more planning figures.
Okay.
Right.
But also it's really relative to what procurement you want to go through. Maybe you want to do a payment term of, not like you said, at milestones. Maybe you would rather do it that way.
Yeah.
And that's all up to us. For the coursework, it's up to us to decide this, I believe. Are you familiar with the
Unless I read a brief.
Okay.
Again. But then I think the key thing is whatever assumptions you are making,
Yeah.
you need to state.
Yes.
Right, you need to state. Maybe if you probably think, okay, you're going by let's say the traditional method where design is separated from construction.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a bit different. In that case, at the very front end, your expenditure will probably be a lot on consultancy, permit, and design.
Yes.
Right. But then,
somehow. But for us, we're not. I think the project we're dealing with is not traditional. But
It's
okay.
simpler than this.
if it's design and build, it's also relatively different. Right, in terms of how you do your planning, it's also different. So it all depends on the procurement strategy you are using and what comes in there. Right. So what we just did. Oh, sorry. Maybe can I borrow the next 10 minutes?
Yes.
Can I borrow the next 10 minutes? Sure. Okay, sure. So what we just did not capture the whole process, right, in terms of what cash flow are. Because cash flow, we said it was the money coming in and the money going out. We've only just calculated what the money coming in. But how do we get the money going out? Right. Which is the next step we need to do. We already did say that the value is the sum of doing the cost of the work. This is quite simple, really, to understand. I mean, your cost would just be the value divided by your over the 1 plus the margin. So this is sorry.
No, let me check.
Can you check?
Do you want to start?
to negotiate. We need to use another 20 minutes. Is that
Sorry,
okay?
Mr. Clark?
Yeah.
No
They
class.
are just looking for membership, that's it.
Okay, okay, right. So basically, I mean, we did say what contractors are paid at what intervals,
That one,
right? To be able to calculate the outgoing, we know that contractors are what paid at intervals. So based on the form of contract, the contractor will need to what estimate when he or she will need to be paid. Maybe a month after interim valuations or 2 months after interim valuation. That will determine when money will what go out from the company. And then there's also the issue of what retention. Typically, it's a percentage of whatever interim valuation is due you, right? So if let's say you are being paid £10,000 this month, right? The client may retain 5% of 10,000, right, over time. And at practical completion, or when the project is completed, the client will release half of the retention to you, of the total retention, and the other half after defect liability period. The client does that to protect, in case there are any defects during the first year, or let's say 6 months. Defect liability period are normally 6 months, but where it's M&E project, where there are a lot of services, it can go for up to a year. So you need to be able to know what sort of clauses are there when it comes to what retention. And then for you as the contractor also, you need to probably negotiate some sort of credit terms with your suppliers and subcontractors. Right.
Sorry, negotiate what?
Sorry?
What did you say? Negotiate a credit term?
Yeah, you as the contractor, you need to negotiate some sort of payment terms with your suppliers and subcontractors.
Okay.
Yeah, when you want to pay them. Right. And if also you probably need to negotiate credit term with your bankers, right? Because you need to pre-finance the project. I do remember you did ask me the last time about why contractor cannot work for 6 months or a year before the contractor is paid. Right. You get to realize when it comes to the cash flow, because at the end of the day, if the contractor works for 6 months, the contractor will need to pre-finance the whole project, which means the contractor will need to go borrow money from a bank. Or if you are even using your own money, you could have invested that money somewhere else and generated a higher return. Right. So let's see, so the program below, right, it's for a factory building to be constructed, right? It shows the value of the activities that have been extracted from the bill of quantity. So here, we know our preliminaries is what, £102,000 over the life cycle of the building. Our profit and overhead margin here is just 5%. And the reason why cash flow is important is because for most contractors, their profit and overhead margin is very, very small. They are always in competition, right? And then retention to be applied to payment is what, 10%. And here we say interim valuation of the works will be undertaken at the end of every month. So if maybe the contractor works in January, the QS will come measure the works that has been done, but then payments will only be made to the contractor a month after interim valuation. So if we measure the work in, let's say, October, we'll pay the contractor about November. So yeah, November, right? And then also the contractor has negotiated credit terms such that they pay its subcontractors a month after they incur any cost. So if a subcontractor works for the contractor, a supplier supplies material, the contractor will only pay 1 month after. And then half the retention is included in the final certificate on practical completion. And the other half 6 months afterwards, practical completion. So this is what we have here. We've been able to draw our program. Now we need to be able to go on further to get our cash flow diagram. So this is a seminar question, and that's what we need to do. I wouldn't go through the steps. You can read the steps later, right? But let's go onto the folder, onto the Moodle folder, and download the week 2 cash flow forecast. Sorry, if you want to go, you can. I know we passed the time. No, I'm saying if you have to go live somewhere, you can go. I know we gone a bit over the time, but this is the last example, and then we'll just get out of here.
Are we doing it right now?
Yeah, I mean, well, we just run through it. Or maybe you can do it later. Which way we go? Should we go through our... So basically, what do you want us to go through, or you want to go do it yourself?
Just do it, since we're out here, just.
Okay. So this is, basically this is what we have here, right? The first thing we need to do earlier on is to be able to what? Allocate what the expenses, right? Here we are assuming that this is what the keyword, rather than cost, this is what the contractor actually did charge the client. So these figures here are what are in the bills of quantity. So they are the actual values. So we do not need to calculate values here, right? This is what the contractor actually charged. So the first thing is 28,000, which we enter. Pilot occurs, it's 1 month, which we enter. Preliminaries, okay, it's supposed to be the project. It's what, 20 months. So
Yeah, 5,100.
okay, so about 20 months. You do the same. So when it comes to the caps and ground beam, it's over 3 months. Right. And then drainage, it's over 4 months. So we divide by 4. Sorry, drainage is 3 months. It's over 3 months. And then still erect steel frame over 2 months. Right. The next is also 2 months. And then roof cladding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over 5 months. And then this we brickwork over 3 months. So basically, you just fill in you fill in the various columns. I've set this up already. So what happens is the very first row here gives you the value of the works, right? Which is a summation of everything you build a client.
Value of what, sorry?
All works.
The value of works.
Yes.
Yeah, the value of works you've done in terms of here. Right. And then the next step is to calculate what our cumulative value, the value of work in terms of at the end of every month, this is what we expect the client to pay out. But then we want to determine the cumulative value over the time. Over the project duration, how much do you expect to earn from the clients? And the cumulative value is basically the sum of the previous month, what you've been paid, plus the current month, which is what we have here. But then there's also a retention clause. We know that for every payment that's due the contractor, the client will deduct what? Retention of 10%. Right. Which is what comes in here. So you multiply your cumulative value times your retention of 10% to be able to know, well, so the actual amount that the contractor will receive, right, will be what? The cumulative value of work less the retention, right, which is, so the 13, the row in 13 minus 14. So that will tell you the actual amount of money the contractor will receive. So for every month, the contractor will receive less than the amount of work he's actually billed the client for, because the client will retain some money. Then we go on to, but then also we do know that at the end of the But then also, we also do know that half the retention, it's paid at what, practical completion, right? So the project is supposed to be completed what, at the end of August 2020. So, but then right when it's done, half the retention will be paid there, which means what, this is the cumulative retention divided by what, 2, will give us half that retention. And then the other half will be paid at what, 6 months after. Right, the other half will be paid 6 months after. All those have been stated in the, when you go on here, when you look at the question, it says what, half the retention is included in the final certificate of practical completion, and the other half released 6 months later. So when you need to take care of that, 21 here. And then we come to the contractor. The actual cost of work, with the contractor, what we said was the profit and overhead margin is what, 11, was it 11 or 12%?
Yes, it was
11%. So the actual cost of the work will be the value of work divided by what? 1.1, right? Which is divided by 1.1, right? So you need to calculate that as well to be able to get. You need to calculate that to be able to get the actual cost of executing the work by the contractor. So the profit and overhead was 5%. So whatever value you had here, so you just add it and you're able to get a cost of doing the work. And then you also need to calculate the cumulative, similar to what we did for cumulative value, you also calculate the cumulative cost. Then the next thing is, okay, so for every cost that the contractor incurs, when does the contractor have to pay the subcontractors or the suppliers? So the question said what? Costs are paid a month after they are incurred by the contractor. So even though the contractor incurred a cost of 31,000 at the beginning of January, the contractor doesn't pay that in January. The contractor pays that in February. So we also need to show when the money will go out from the contractor, and this is where it goes. And then once we do